they probably have depression for 4 reasons that have actually nothing to do with having depression, and you're essentially gaslighting these people into believing they have these things. Essentially, a world without that is a world that we are for. Okay, so 3 things that I will do for you in this speech. Firstly, on setup, of like, what does this mental health awareness look like, the vulnerable stakeholders, and how we see this as a reoccurring trend. Secondly, about how mental health awareness content on TikTok actively harms society. And thirdly, on how we actually get better mental health awareness on our side of the house. Okay, so firstly on setup. So what do we see this mental health awareness looking like? Okay, so we see this as misrepresentations of mental health awareness. So like inaccurate description of what depression or anxiety actually is. Secondly, over-romanticization of mental illness. So like maybe glorifying depression, making it seem like a cool and edgy thing to have. Thirdly, on like gaslighting vulnerable users, saying like, you definitely have this if you do these 3 things, even though they're definitely not correlated to the mental illness whatsoever. And fourthly, we see people actually utilizing this and people trying to give their advice on like what are remedies that you can have to solve these problems, remedies that don't work, and remedies that can actively be very harmful. And secondly, on the vulnerable stakeholders that we see affected. Okay, so we see kids who are still discovering themselves, who are unsure about like who they actually are in this world, what they're actually going through. We see parents who are unsure about their own children, or what their own children are going through, and a lack of understanding of that. We see insecure kids who are desperate for attention and things like this, and who are willing to do anything for it. And fourthly, we see more of the mentally ill kids who are not actually fully confident in the fact that they have an actual mental illness. Thirdly, on setup, we see a trend of this. We see a reoccurring trend of this mental health content, of these misrepresentations, of this over-romanticization, all of these harmful things because people are desperate for fame, because people do not want to profit off of bad things when they get attention. And because of this, this trend is seen as cringy because most things that are trends are tend to have negative judgment. And so this judgment from others just creates another layer of why it is so harmful in the first place, because it makes people who do have these mental illnesses feel unsafe. I will take a POI if there is one.
Do you have any mechanism as to why this content is likely to be like misinformation or misinformed?
Yes, I will get into that now. Okay, so on how this content actively harms society. Okay, so let's look at these actual TikTok creators. What are they likely to be influenced by? What are they likely to want? They want likes, they want money, which they get by the creator fund on TikTok, and they're likely to want clout and want fame. Okay, so where does this fit into this debate? So we see in anything, in any aspect, but specifically in this debate where we see mental health awareness, when something gains popularity, they want to profit off of this popular thing. And by doing this, they tend to utilize this thing, and like romanticize it. They tend to glorify the actual mental illness. They tend to use the fact that people are either scared of it or love it so much and flip it against them. Okay, so just like a few mechanisms to back that up. Firstly, on the misrepresentations of mental health and why this is so harmful. Well, when vulnerable users see this, they start attributing these representations to themselves or to other people, which is just as worse. When you're told that you may have depression because, I don't know, maybe you go to sleep late, and you start attributing these things to yourself, you're actively more likely to like think that you actually have depression, and then start gaslighting yourself into actually having those traits yourself. Or when you attribute those to other people, you make generalizations about them which are very harmful. Secondly, on gaslighting vulnerable users like tend to be the ones who are actually convinced that they have mental illness, even when sometimes they don't. This causes like a lot of fear and a lot of like a build-up of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I have this, which can cause actual mental health problems like anxiety and like self-diagnosing, which leads to all of those things. Thirdly, on like how like it's over-romanticized, which we see 2 different types of people. We see people who don't want to get rid of their mental health because it's seen as cool, trendy, and popular. And secondly, we see people who actually don't have mental health like issues, and they actually want they actually want to have them, which leads to like people doing things like self-harming for attention, like actively harming themselves. Bordering on remedies of like what this looks like. What does this look like, first of all? It looks like dumb stuff that doesn't work, like maybe just like putting lemon in your tea and thinking that that somehow solves depression. But the harm of this is when people actually try these remedies out for themselves and they don't actually work, they think that this means that they're crazy, they're mental, their condition is getting worse. So what are the outcomes of this and why is it so important? We see that people are unaware on the issues, on the only issues, which makes like it easier for people to judge them. There's desperation to actually have mental health issues. People harm themselves just to attain a mental illness because it's considered cool, and we leave people in a worse mental state, especially our most vulnerable actors in this debate. Okay, so second, I will take a POI again if there is one.
How is mental health over romanticized, for instance?
So, for instance, like it's portrayed as cool and edgy, and it gives you character, and it gives you like a lot of depth as a person, and all of a sudden, oh, I have depression, I have trauma, and it's so funny. Like, it's glorified to the extent that it shouldn't be. Okay, so how do we actively get better mental health awareness on our side of the house? Well, a world where this actual trend itself does not exist, we see that, okay, just a really important thing I want to clarify here. Mental illness is not something that is actually caused by these harmful TikToks. More like mental illness can definitely be harmed, which is a very bad thing. But mental illness itself is not rooted in these harmful like TikToks. And because of that, people are still mentally ill because of things like stress, school, like bad relationships with their parents. And because kids are naturally curious, they naturally want to look for sources, for more credible resources to be better informed. Which means that on our side of the house, we are more for, we're not for awareness of like, in terms of numbers of people, we're for awareness in terms of knowledge, and in terms of actual facts, in terms of actually people voicing their concerns because there's no judgment, because there's no fear, because there's no longer trends, and there's no longer judgment inside of that. And when people are actively searching for better sources, they're voicing their concerns, they become better informed on their actual situation because they're talking to actual professionals. So what are the outcomes of this, and why is this so important? There's less fear of being judged because of your mental illness. We have less people thinking it's actually cool, and more people wanting to actually get better. We have people who actually have more credible sources, people who want to do better, like, in the world, less people being gaslighted, less vulnerable actors being harmed. Proud to affirm.
Thank you to the first affirmative speaker for that speech. Now let's welcome up the first negating speaker to begin their team's case.
The first affirming speaker today has simply told us that creators are going to create harmful content without providing ample mechanisms. Throughout my speech today, I'm going to tell you about why TikTok is a useful tool for spreading mental health knowledge, why we think this popular content is likely to be accurate, and then how this benefits people with mental health problems. But first, I'm going to go through a little bit of rebuttal, and then I'll continue to cover points throughout my speech. Alright, so to begin with, that bit I brought up in my introduction, I think there's a missing mechanisms on the affirmative case as to why creators are inherently going to create harmful content. I'll tell you why actually we think it's the opposite. They're going to create helpful content, or helpful content is going to be the content that succeeds. Alright, and then they've told us about how it makes mental health seem super cool, right? And super everybody wants this, but actually we don't think it does at all, really. We think that there's terrible mental health in some of our younger generations, and so we have people who are engaging with this platform who have terrible mental health, and so they're able to actually put themselves on that platform and show people like, this is a terrible thing, it's ruined my life, I found it terrible. And like we think people are able to access this this like accurate representation of like what a terrible time this can be. And I'll go into that during my like substantive part. Alright, first of all, why is TikTok an important tool in like mental health coverage? So, to begin with, yeah, young people like currently have like terrible mental health. They're facing like numerous issues at such a young age, things like COVID-19, things like, you know, a global recession associated with COVID-19, things like global warming, war in like Europe. And so they're facing like a terrible world, they likely have terrible mental health. And then lots of these young people use TikTok, like it's incredibly like influential among young people, and so it is like a really effective means of spreading information. Alright, why is like popular content on TikTok likely to be accurate? So we've got like 4, maybe 5 mechanisms here. Alright, so to begin with, TikTok as a company has like an interest in upholding an image. It has an interest in seeming like it's not spreading like terribly harmful misinformation that is like leading to children having terrible mental health, because like they're already facing huge pushback all over the West for like associations with China, and we think if they were to like add this kind of tool to the arsenal of like that counter people arguing against them, they'd like face huge backlash, they'd be unable to operate in these markets, and so they're like really not very interested at all in hosting harmful content, and so they're very likely to remove it if it comes to their attention, which it very likely will if it's popular. Alright, content creators aren't interested in creating harmful content because like we have this idea of like a cancel culture within Twitter. If people are creating incredibly harmful content, assuming like viewers can identify it, they're likely to argue against it, likely to maybe report them, they're likely to say like, oh, you know, don't watch this person, they're a terrible person, they're coming out with all these terrible ideas that really aren't good. And then they're likely to propose alternatives or maybe like provide sources that people can look at about as to like what actual useful information is. And so because this like that content creators aren't interested in making inaccurate content, because as the first phone we talked about, they're interested in like getting views. They won't get those if they can't be like if no one's watching them anymore because they've been cancelled, they've been like just deleted by TikTok.
POI?
Yep, sure.
Wouldn't impressionable youth assume that most of the content that is spreading these lies and misinformation isn't in fact true?
So that's what I'm about to go on to now. We think there are professionals on these like platforms who are able to provide like a more educated standpoint as to why you know, certain content isn't true or why certain content is accurate. So we've got like 2 main parts here. To begin with, why are professionals interested in engaging with TikTok? To begin with, we're talking about like psychiatrists, we're talking about psychologists. Like these are the kind of people who have gone into this field to help people. They're interested in helping people, interested in improving the mental health of people, because like it isn't a high-paying field. Like as a general rule, it isn't terribly high-paying, and so they've clearly got some interest in helping people. And so because of that, we can like assume that they just have an inherent like want to help the world, and so because of that, they'll be likely to help. There's an incredibly low barrier to entry for them, like starting to platform themselves on TikTok. Like all you need is a phone, and we think everyone in our modern world has that. And so they're like incredibly low barrier to entry, and so because of this, that like they're able to publish accurate content, which like provides information, and they're also able to fact check other content creators and ensure that other people are publishing accurate content, and maybe like I guess expose like people who are publishing harmful content or content that's misinformative. Right. And then we think people are interested in engaging on professionals on TikTok. Like to begin with, the first affirmative speaker talked about how like youth are just like generally curious and interested in learning about like mental health, and so because of that, we think they're likely to engage with professionals because they're like viewed as an important viewpoint. We also think like people like to feel like they're above misinformation. They like to feel like they're better than like, you know, the idiots who watch like the misinformative stuff. And so we think because of that, they're interested in like watching professionals on TikTok. No, thank you. And then also we think there's a slight idea that maybe professionals are more positive than like general people on TikTok. We think as a general like culture is like rather toxic. Like they're rather like I guess kind of like doom posting. And then we think these professionals are like to be slightly more positive. And so people because they don't have to rely on scare tactics or like negativity to get views because they've got a job outside of TikTok. And so they don't need to rely on this for income. And so they're more likely to publish like a more real viewpoint, I guess, and a more accurate viewpoint because they're professionals and they're interested in helping
You're
people.
right.
And so because of this, we see like, no thank you, we see lots of like, this popular content is very likely to be accurate, and it's very likely to be like moderated by both TikTok, by the community, and by like professionals. Right, and why is this how does this benefit people with mental health problems? So it allows people to learn what these mental health problems look like how it affects people who have these. So what does this mean? So it means people are able to like realize like, oh, you know, maybe this thing I've been struggling with, maybe it's actually something that I should talk to a doctor about, and they're able to do that. They're able to talk to a doctor, they're able to get a diagnosis, they're able to, you know, maybe access medication, maybe access therapy, no thank you. It allows them to know more about people with mental health problems, and so what that means is they're like possibly less discriminatory, less bigoted when they're talking about these people, and maybe they've got like a more varied viewpoint, and like they're in general more kind to these people. It means people with mental health issues are able to like access representation. They're able to feel like they're seen. They're able to feel like there are other people facing their struggles, and like I think that's incredibly beneficial for them because it means they're able to like keep on working through their problems and keep on, you know, possibly looking for therapy. Keep on like just trying to keep on going. And then we think it like helps combat misconceptions that people might have about
POI?
about no thank you about these mental health problems, and we think it also provides an avenue for when people can recognise like these mental health issues, they're able to help others in their life who might be struggling. Like if they maybe had a friend who had depression, they're now able to talk to them, they're able to help them, and like help them access help. And so through this, we're able to see that by like through this mental health awareness content on TikTok, we've seen like huge access to like young people today who have very terrible mental health, and they've been able to access accurate content that's been able to educate them, help them, like make them more compassionate. Thank you.
Thank you to the first negating speaker for that speech. Now I'd like to welcome forward the second speaker of the affirmative side to continue their team's case.
The mistake the affirmative the negativity makes today is resting their case on the simple fact that just because something is popular, and then in turn means it will simply be accurate. This is completely not true. The way they try to back this up is by saying because these videos, this genre of TikToks is so popular, it means that all the videos that the youth are seeing, the impressionable youth are seeing, are gonna be accurate 100% of the time. Everything they see on this app, which is known for spreading misinformation, known for being a cesspool of the worst people on the internet, is gonna be accurate information, which is a complete misstep by the affirmative team. Two things in this debate. Firstly, the clashes. Firstly, the clashes on which side has more accurate information. Firstly, on which side has more accurate information and which side benefits. Secondly, on which side benefits youth. And then second thing in this debate, the split point, which is how it spreads harmful mischaracterizations of mental health. Firstly, on the clashes. Firstly, on the clash of which side gets more accurate information. What we hear from the affirmative team, is one main push that because this mental health awareness is popular, our creators are going to want to be accurate with the information they use, that they're more likely going to not want to do harmful stuff, that TikTok is not going to allow these kind of harmful videos to actually be allowed on their site. Few responses to this. Firstly, we see time and time again, TikTok has allowed the most heinous things on the internet to be allowed on their site. We see this in Australia, videos of girls being rushed and their houses being burned down, being leaked onto TikTok. We see time and time again, TikTok is a cesspool for the most egregious behavior on the internet. Time and time again, we've seen TikTok prove itself to be a cesspool for some of the most
You're right.
terrible things. So we see this as evidence that TikTok doesn't really have the strictest rules and regulations as the negative team will try to paint. Secondly, also we see that a lot of creators on TikTok rely on these kinds of trends to make a living. They rely on the clicks, they rely on the views and the likes. So obviously a lot of creators are gonna want to try and hop on the mental health awareness trend, try to spread their own kind of stories about mental health, regardless of whether or not it's accurate, because for the simple fact, it's trendy. TikTok creators rely on these kinds of trends to make a living, to actually be relevant. They need to keep up with what's relevant. And what we see is that because of the relevancy and the fact that on TikTok it becomes sort of a trend that these TikTok creators will hop on it. What this means is that, in actuality, a lot of the information that it means that the claims the negating team makes, that they rest a large majority of their case on about having accurate information, can't stand because of the simple nature of TikTok in itself, the nature of the creators. And again, as you see in the status quo, many creators have been called out for actually faking these disabilities in order to get pity and views from viewers. We see a lot of them play on the vulnerability of a lot of viewers in order to gain sympathy from them, to get popularity via sympathy, faking these mental health disorders. So you see, again, there's a lot of incentive, as my first speaker brought up, for these creators to actually be dishonest with the content they're making. And even at their best, where we see, yes, we do get some accurate information, still we see that that these TikToks will be oversaturated with a bunch of TikToks saying clickbaity kind of titles with all these 5 signs you have ADHD, 5 signs you're depressed, how to fix your depression, all these kind of poppy titles, because that's the kind of things the algorithm feeds on. If it looks big and bright or like big, bold one-liners, that's the kind of things the algorithm will prey on, which is why we win that. And what this means for the debate is that a large majority of the case simply cannot stand due to the following reasons, which is why we win that class. Secondly, on which side gets better mental health. Again, a lot of the main pushes stem around creators being honest with the content they're creating, being actually professional, and being honest with the stuff they're making, and also around a lot of professionals. Three responses to this. As I stated in the past clash, that there's simply too many incentives for creators to actually lie about their mental health status, to actually lie about all that stuff I stated in the past, which is why that simply can't stand. And secondly, on the point of professionals, we do agree, yes, there may be some professionals on TikTok who do understand this, but again, as I stated before, the oversaturation of the TikTok algorithm means that these professionals on the site may not be able to get the popularity that they need, not as much as some of these other bigger creators. They also talk a lot about how these people with mental health issues will actually get a lot of representation through this. A few responses to this, we see that the representation that they'll be getting from TikTok is actually quite harmful, and not the kind of representation that we want to be giving young impressionable people that might actually have mental illness. This is not the kind of message we want to push to them, because they see misrepresentations of themselves. They then reflect on themselves and say, oh my gosh, is this what I'm like? Is this what I have? This is actually way more harmful on their side of the house, because they're actually not only spreading misinformation about mental health, which I will get into in my speak point, but they're actually harming those that actually have pre-existing mental health because of the misconceptions about their mental health illnesses. Which is why what this means in the debate is that, again, a large portion of the pushes they make simply can't stand for the following reasons, which is why we win that clash. Onto my speak point on how this creates mischaracterizations of mental health illnesses. First, on context. What we see in the status quo is that due to the popularity of TikTok, the nature of the algorithms, we see that when something becomes popular, becomes trendy, a lot of creators, as I stated, are going to want to hop on said trend to stay relevant and to become popular, to make money in the creator fund by getting views, clicks, likes, shares, all that kind of stuff. Simply, like my first speaker went over. And this leads because it's so widespread, so popular, this eventually leads to a lot of misinformation. Misinformation, again, as my first speaker went over. Now it's also mechanism. We see, because when it becomes of this nature, when an issue like mental health becomes of this nature, we see that through the widespreadness of it, eventually we should begin to see a lot of misinformation be spread. Because obviously, when there's a million different people making videos about one singular topic, one singular mental health issue, or many mental health issues, we see that not all of these information sources are going to be accurate. Not all of the information they get is going to be 100% truthful. And what this means, what this means is that because of that, a lot of people that watch these videos, a lot of the youth that will end up seeing this content again get misinformation. And even if we take them at their best, they also stated take them at their best again. We see that even if some people see accurate information, it's still going to be drowned out by the situation of a lot of the clickbaity terms. What this means is that a lot of people are going to be misinformed about these issues. Why is this harmful? Because then when they go on, they take a look at themselves, they might mischaracterize themselves as having said mental health issues. This leads to a lot of other dangerous behaviors that on our side we do not stand for, but on their side they actually help create. Which is why, the mission stand proud to your freedom.
Thank you to the second affirmative speaker for that speech. Now let's welcome the second negating speaker to continue that team's case.
In my speech, I will first begin by providing my responses to the affirmative team's case. I will then secondly move into my point about why, and further elaborate on how TikTok mental health awareness content is beneficial for improving mental health, and then further expand on why the content is reliable, created by professionals, and is effective. In this debate, the affirmative team has stated that that this content is inaccurate. They've not really provided a lot of substantial reasoning why. They've continuously repeated that that the youth are impressionable, not really giving any mechanism why they're impressionable, and that's somehow going to make them susceptible to people who want to manipulate them. But who are these people that actually want to manipulate? They say we have proven at our first speaker that in the nature of TikTok content, stuff that is popular and reaches a lot of people gets critiqued. It gets critiqued by the people on the platform, it gets critiqued by TikTok itself, and it gets critiqued by mental health industry professionals who also on TikTok, possibly creating TikTok, or just happen to be seeing it. Harmful content, stuff that is inaccurate, is untruthful, or is a lie, is removed. Why is it removed? Well, TikTok, as we've proven, has the incentive to remove this harmful content because they know, because the consequences of this harmful content existing, it's quite bad. It could lead to further worsening mental health, suicide. So TikTok, they want to make money. They really don't want to get sued and don't want to have their platform destroyed by governments who just don't. If they see this happening, they're not going to want anything to do with. They're going to ban TikTok. It's in TikTok's interest to make sure there is no harmful content being on the platform.
POI?
So if something's getting a lot of views and reaching a wide audience, that means it's going to get a lot of critique. If it is, if bad people are going to see that, they're going to report it. It's going to get taken off, and it's not going to actually reach people. It's not going to be there. On the other hand, we have if the content is not popular, because if it's popular, it's going to get reported and removed, and not going to be negatively affect people. If it is insignificant, well, if it's not popular and then doesn't get reported because it's only reached 2 people, well then it only reached 2 people, and in the grand schemes of the world, it's really not that dangerous compared to the benefits that we have. Moving on to how they've stated that, no, thank you, that TikTok, that people on TikTok are glorifying mental health conditions, which is meaning more people, adopt these conditions or somehow. This is completely unsubstantiated. They've said that it's cool to have mental health issues, but they've not provided any mechanism why. Just because a lot of people have it or have something going on doesn't mean people see that and see it's good. On the contrary, we would argue that mental health is actually uncool in the sense that because it has such detrimental and horrific consequences, people are able to see this is a serious issue, this needs to be taken serious, this has serious consequences, this is a serious topic. Which means that, people aren't looking at it and being like, it's not like, the latest pair of shoes or school bag. It's a serious topic. It's not something that people thought around accepted.
Earlier you stated that people will generally not accept it. Does this include young impressionable kids?
Even young kids have the ability to do a quick Google search onto where their content is coming from. And this is, and I'll further elaborate this on why professionals specifically, which are popular content creators, but they're also reliable. And it's also very easy to be proven if the content creator is unreliable. Reasoning for this is it's very easy to do a quick 2-minute Google search. So in the case of, if you're able to Google search who this person is, it either comes up if you're university qualified as a psychologist, information will come up with your qualifications, you'll be able to see they're reliable. If you're not able to find the person, you're probably not reliable, and you can easily make that judgment and not listen to that content. It's not that hard to make that discernment regardless of your young. And they've also, furthermore, they've brought up the point that that TikTok, there's been these exceptions. There's been these examples of the Australian teen and the house burning down. But this is nothing but hearsay. This is completely unsubstantiated. There is no mechanism or evidence to say that this actually occurred. On the contrary, I could quite easily say that this never happened. TikTok is a wonderful place, and all the stuff on there is great. That's the equivalent here. What we have, which is what I will now move into, is real substantive reasoning why mental health awareness actually benefits people. So firstly, why mental health awareness is beneficial for improving people's mental health. We have, as a part of this content, people have success stories. People who have suffered from mental health in the past are, tell their stories to help others through the, troubling times that they had. It was difficult when they suffered through it, so they want to help others. What they do, they create a content saying about what they went through, and it's, some ways how they got through their mental health issue and how they dealt with it, whether that they're going to seek professional help or getting, go seeking professional advice, medication, whatnot, engaging with other people, and this, it also allows people who are suffering this issue to see that these people have, gone past it, have become successful, and it's not the end of the line, that they can get past this and then have a good life. This is motivational and improves these people's mental health and lives. It can clear up misconceptions about things. And we have these professionals who are reliable, that they explain what a condition is actually about. Some things, they're not the most simple things to understand always. So easily when you have people, just chatting about things, they can, provide things that are, misconceptions about what some of these conditions are. People can actually explain what they are. This can be seen, so we have greater awareness in the community, and this helps people because it feels the people who are suffering these issues feel like they're more understood and can more readily maybe interact with other people if they don't feel like their condition's going to be so easily misunderstood. We have, you understand that you're not alone. This is a very big thing when you have people suffering these mental health issues. You might not know that other people out there are suffering them. This can make it difficult to go seek help. if you're seeing this, you're going to go seek, you can seek help, and you can possibly also discover that you may have a condition that you may possibly have not known, which will then allow you to go seek professional medical help and advice. You can actually get treatment for that condition that otherwise wouldn't have happened. So that we see these outcomes of improved mental health in our world. On the contrary, if we accept the negative teams case, we're seeing a world where TikTok, without TikTok mental health awareness, with undiagnosed conditions, isolated people, and far more preventable suicides. Thank you.
Thank you to the second negating speaker for that speech. Now it's welcome forward the third speaker from the affirmative side.
Few things I want to put in today's debate. First, that mental health is indeed glorified on TikTok. Second, that TikToks on mental health are generally inaccurate and third, that this trend as a whole, this trend of mental health awareness at all is not a benefit to anyone and is instead something else. So first of all, I'd like to give is mental health glorified? So what we've heard from the opposition is that these people who react to these people's cases, they feel a certain way that they don't want to be affected in this, and rightfully say. Sure, people don't want these serious diseases, etc., etc. But when we're looking at these young impressionable kids, when they look at this trend on TikTok, they are obviously going to be influenced by it to a certain extent. And also this group mentality around this whole mass depression that we're having is all done because of the glorification that mental health on TikTok. All these, if you have these certain aspects, then you may have this certain condition. All of this, and this is what these young kids are consuming day to day. Because as we all know, TikTok is used by adolescents to teenagers. These people are the most impressionable people. So, is mental health glorified on TikTok? Yes.
Point of information.
Okay.
Why are they impressionable?
Why are they impressionable? Because of the fact that they are kids and they don't know better. That is all that's all that needs to be said. Second, are TikToks on mental health accurate? And this is one of the more major points of clash, and one that we're going to prove in order to win this debate. A couple pushes from the opposition. First, they stated that these are accurate due to a phenomenon called cancel culture. They stated that cancel culture will ensure that these creators are accurate, because if not, they'll be put down. But first of all, let me also remind you guys that this is a trend. This is done by millions of people. And to use cancel culture in this example specifically is quite irrelevant due to the fact that cancel culture normally focuses on more on social issues. Like when we talk about like the Me Too movement or like social issues. See, on the fact that these cancel culture people, they aren't actively looking for these people who are spreading this misinformation on mental health due to the fact that their issues are in another field. Another push they try to, yes.
Do you recognise that like this idea of cancelling often applies to like spokespersons or like influential people?
Yes, due to the fact that it is, the reason why it's impacted is because these people have influence in the first place. That they're not, because of their actions and what they did in regards to these social issues, which is quite irrelevant to this to ensuring that these mental health creators are accurate in the first place. Second, another push they had was that TikTok are incentivized to ban inaccurate posts. But instead, I could flip it on them. TikTok gains a percentage of capital of money from these posts due to advertisements, etc., etc. To advertisements. So in a way, TikTok is also incentivized to allow these posts to continue. They try to make the case that therapists are incentivized to make content due to low pay. But what this only proves is that money
You know what?
isn't incentivization. This proves from both sides that money isn't incentivization in this instance. That therapists, due to low pay, are willing to make content for views, for clicks, for likes to make up for their money. One of the biggest push throughout the whole argument is that popular content is popular because it's cheap, and it is criticized. Well, first of all, since we've grasped the fact that this TikTok is generally used by adolescents, teenagers, these trends are not being brought up by these smart people who are educated on the subject. These trends are being brought about by kids and this mass group mentality that these kids have in regards to these mental issues.
Okay.
No, and also for the fact that these TikToks use another phenomenon called clickbait. And clickbait is a valid thing where people will actively try and do stuff to their content to make people click it more, to make people like it more. So that is why they try to use these relatable types of relatable forms of content to prove that someone has this mental disease. And because of all of this, this not only proves that TikToks are in fact harmful, but it also proves that it is not a good tool to use for people who have mental issues, which was their biggest push and their first point, that it was a good tool for these types of people to use. Secondly, is this trend beneficial? Well, what we've heard from the opposing side is that, yes, these mental health awareness TikToks are beneficial due to the fact that these people these creators specifically, who have these stories are able to tell it and able to have these kids acknowledge it. But as I've proven in my last point of clash, is that the majority of these content, even though there are a few, the exceptions does not make the rules. We cannot trust this as a whole due to the fact that there are definite incentives, whether it is to get money, whether it is to get clout or clicks or anything. So that is why these can't be trusted. And what is an alternative that people could use if they couldn't use TikTok? If there was a world that TikTok never had this trend? Well, of course, the other outlets they could use are therapists, are doctors to go get prescriptions, etc., etc. And even if they don't feel comfortable in telling their parents, if they could go to the doctors or the therapists, if they don't feel comfortable, in most progressive Western developed states, there are other outlets that kids can go directly, whether it be social lines, whether it be counselors, whether it be social workers within the schools. There are systems in place now to combat this, and it provides a far more better alternative to the trend of mental health awareness. So for all, and the reason, and this proves that these trends aren't beneficial. There is another outlet for kids to use, and a far superior one at that. And that is why I am so proud to affirm.
Thank you to the third affirmative speaker for that speech. Now let's welcome forward the third negating speaker.
Our entire case relies on one mechanism, which is simply have not provided well enough to win this debate. There's all the points which I'll list right now: misleading contact, romanticization of mental health, misinformation of mental health, and gaslighting vulnerable users through misinformative mental health videos, all rely on the idea that TikTok is filled with videos that pose misinformed viewers about mental health. Now, us on the negating team have provided plenty of mechanisms to support the idea that most of the content on TikTok will be for positive mental health changes. Now, this is ultimately what became the core clash of this debate, on whether or not the mechanism, whether or not TikTok is mostly negative or positive mental health content. Now, I'll go over why exactly our mechanisms prove that TikTok is going to be filled with positive content, and simply rebut any of the rebuttal. Any of the rebuttal the affirming team has said. Now, the affirming team has come up and said that professional therapists
The
Point.
affirming team has come and said that people are incentivized to spread misinformation for the trend. They want to make money because TikTok is our livelihood. I just simply think this is untrue. If you are a TikTok creator with a massive following, why would you want to risk your entire livelihood on a single video? Now, what's the risk with making these kinds of videos? Well, TikTok has an incentive TikTok's an incentive to have a safe platform. They don't want the people using the platform to think it's full of misinformation. Why is this? Because people want to use an app that is informative.
Point.
They don't want to be full of lies. So TikTok would gain nothing from having this misleading content on their platform. So TikTok would be quick to remove or ban people that simply spread misinformation for clicks because it harms their own self-image. Now, along with that, even if TikTok just happened to miss this content creator, there would also be the issue where people would call out this content creator. They would address that these claims are false or harmful. Now, the affirming team themselves agreed with us, saying that people get called out on TikTok all the time. So if people get TikTok, people simply risk their self-image on TikTok and they get called out all the time, why would someone do that? Why would someone ruin their career on TikTok in order to gain a few views on a certain video? So I think it's simply ridiculous to think that there is that there's going to be negative videos on TikTok simply because TikTok will not allow these videos to be on platform, and the community of TikTok will not stand when these negative videos come out. Now that it's shown that it's the clashless debate and the core mechanism behind all the points that have been addressed today is ultimately going towards AF, where TikTok's going to be mostly full of positive content. All of Meg's points come into play. So these points would be spreads positive hope in the people with the illness, right? So if you have people who are suffering from a mental illness and they see videos, of people who are struggling with these mental illness and have overcome great odds, you would feel proud. You would feel like you could do the same thing. This motivates people who are in a predicament where generally they feel bad because they believe, because of the mindset of society where you're not normal, they feel as if they can't do the same thing a normal person can. But these videos of people succeeding with these mental illnesses simply negates that stereotype and gives people the confidence to live life to the fullest.
Point.
Now, sure.
There are thousands of videos that are harmful that go viral on TikTok every day. Since when are there thousands of people who reject this?
Well, I can say there's hundreds of millions of positive videos that go to TikTok every day. Doesn't mean it's true. So that you just haven't run a mechanism where it makes sense that someone rationally posts a video that glorifies mental health. Glorifies the bad sides of spreads misinformation and gets away with it. This simply doesn't happen because TikTok would take it down. So we don't see thousands of videos of harmful content, and any content that does become popular, people have a function called reporting it. So in case TikTok misses something, if the video gets lots of reports, a monitor will check it, and they'll take it off because it harmed their business. Now, back to our positives. It removes the misconception around certain mental health. So certain people may have stereotypes surrounding mental health due to things such as due to past things, maybe just common misconception. Now this can be things such as like autism giving people certain superpowers, where certain people who are autistic may be seen to have certain abilities because of autism. This is a harmful stereotype that every single person with autism someone has a special ability, when this is obviously not the truth. Videos that address this could remove that stereotype, and then people with autism don't have to go through the struggle of explaining to people why they don't have a superpower. Now, along with that, another thing positive we've explained is it can help people or others with mental health. Now, if you don't know you have a mental health, you may be suffering from depression, have ADHD, or you may have anxiety, you are not going to get the help you need, whether it be therapy or medication. Now, the issue with that is you're going to live life to life struggling. You could have dyslexia, you could have ADHD, you could be anxious and can't go in crowds, and you would never realize that you had this mental illness. Now, seeing that mental illness, someone speaking about mental illness and what the symptoms are, you could figure out that you might be struggling with this and go to a therapist or doctor to see if you actually have this. This is positive because we don't have people struggling on their day-to-day lives. Now, along with that, we also said people who don't have mental health being able to tell if someone's struggling with something. Simply, other people being informed, they can tell if someone is struggling with, might be struggling with symptoms of depression. So, I set you a world where we don't have TikTok mental health videos. So in this world, we don't have any positive mental health videos on TikTok at all. So there's simply nothing about mental health on TikTok. So if you're a person who's suffering from mental illness, you will struggle to realize you have a mental illness simply because you don't know what those symptoms are. You don't know this mental illness exists. Now what this poses, it poses a risk. Because now you're struggling when you don't need to struggle. Simply having TikTok there allows you to inform yourself and then allows you to get yourself checked. Now, another way this world could work is, if you have a relative or friend who's been acting a bit strange lately, maybe they've been not talking as much, maybe they've been introverted, this could be because of signs of depression. If you had not realized these are the symptoms of depression, you wouldn't have checked up on them. And then you could have one less friend. So knowing what the symptoms of depression were, you could have potentially, in the worst case, saved a life. And even if they didn't have depression, you still would have checked up on a friend. And that's what we stand for on the Negating side of this debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the third negating speaker for that speech. Now, as is custom, we'll reverse the speaking order, and I invite the negating team's leaders reply speaker to give their speech.
What does ACT's case in this debate look like at its strongest? Well, at first ACT, they told us that creators will publish harmful content, and so we'll see mental health being glorified, and so people will have negative impacts from there. At second ACT, we were told, we will provide some rebuttal to the first from first negating's stuff about how creators rely on views and they're going to jump on trends, and professionals will struggle to gain popularity on the platform. Third affirming told us that that TikTok wants to gain from this kind of shop content and the views that they get there. Professionals are driven by money, and that they have alternatives like therapists, doctors, helplines, counsellors. Alright, to begin with, we take that strongest with none of our rebuttal, none of their benefits are exclusive. We still have therapists and doctors, helplines and counsellors in a world without TikTok mental health content. Alright. But let's go through what our rebuttal was. Alright, beginning with rebuttal from our first speaker, we talked about how actually they didn't really provide any mechanisms as to why content creators are incentivized to produce harmful content, and we told you that we don't think it really does make mental health seem cool because we think these people have actually experienced mental health issues and they're able to publish really real and really terrible accounts of what's gone wrong in their life, how it affected them and why it was such a terrible thing. Alright, what was our substantive push from first negating? We talked about how we gave you all of these reasons why popular content is likely to be accurate, and this is the contentious part of this debate. Is this content going to be accurate? Because we've both sides have conceded that if the content is accurate, then it'll benefit people. If it's inaccurate, it'll be harmful. But we've given you a variety of mechanisms why it's likely to be accurate. To begin with, TikTok doesn't want to sully its image because that'll affect its performance in Western markets and maybe even remove from those markets. We didn't really get any strong reply from the affirmative team, rather than a couple of assertions that actually they don't care about their image because they've done these things in the past, but they haven't actually provided any mechanisms as to why they don't care about this image or why they don't care about the massive capital loss that they'd have if they were forced to pull out of these Western markets. We then told you about why even without TikTok, like moderation, content creators will likely be like cancelled by their viewers if they are like posting harmful views. And we've really got no like reply from this at all from the affirming team. And then we told you that professionals are interested in engaging with TikTok. We got told at third affirming that perhaps that these professionals are actually driven by money, but like really we don't think that's true. We think they're driven by an altruistic will to like help the world, because that's why they got into a profession like psychology, like psychiatry. We don't see them having like huge high-paying jobs, and so like they clearly have some sort of inherent will to like help the world. And then they also talked about, and then we talked about how like people are interested in engaging with professionals. We didn't see any response from that point. And so we see that like really the affirmative team has failed to provide like adequate mechanisms as to why content creators are going to publish harmful content. But even if we accept that they do, like we think they only see like a very tiny benefit, because like realistically things like therapist doctors, helpline counselors are available under both sides of the house. Like it's not with TikTok content creation we remove all of those possibilities. And so like we see like all of these benefits that we told you at first, we told you at second, we told you at third, about people being able to like help work out like maybe the problems they've been facing, help fight through like mental health issues and maybe help those around them. And so we see like incredibly large benefits to this. Proud to stand.
Thank you to the negating speaker for their speech. Now I'd like to invite the affirmative side's leaders reply to conclude the debate.
Gaslighting, the over-romanticization of mental illness, taking advantage of vulnerable kids and gaslighting them into thinking that they have something that they don't. According to the negating side, none of these things exist. The metric in which I think this debate should be judged by is the capacity in which we're able to improve mental health. Since it is both, like, we both want to improve mental health. We both think it's an issue that is like weighs heavily in this debate. So who is actually able to get the results that we need in this world? Okay, so the 2 points that I want to go over is the accuracy of the actual content and like the popularity of it and how that affects things. And secondly, on the actual benefits itself to mental health. Okay, so firstly, on the accuracy of content. The reason why I feel like this point of clash weighs so heavily in this debate is because their entire argument is so contingent on the fact that it's just all of this content is positive. They live in an idealistic world where none of the stuff that we mentioned at first app, at second app, at third app, all of it doesn't exist. We have told you time and time again about the saturation itself of clickbait. And so what do we hear from side negating? We hear that stuff that is harmful will be removed. We have already responded to this and said that TikTok does not actually have they do not actually have the capacity in terms of actual workers and in terms of finances to actually get rid of these TikToks because they capitalize off of it. So this entire point that was really heavily leaned on by the negating team just altogether falls. And then at the same time, like, they talk about creators, which is a big part of them. Like I said, negating lives in a very idealistic world where all creators don't want to get cancelled, they want to do a good job, TikTok wants to do a good job, but we tell you that this simply doesn't exist because these creators have the incentive to actually profit off of these kids, to get clout, and we tell you this very clearly at first affirmative. It was made very clear in this debate, and this went on ignored to say just a bunch of content, just to say that none of this exists. Now that we've dealt with the part that they're so contingent on, let's talk about why this weighs so heavily to the next point of clash, right? So secondly, on the benefits to actual mental health. Well, we tell you that all of these things that exist, and very much do exist in the current status quo with this mental health awareness on TikTok, things like the romanticization, they look at these stakeholders with actual logic. They look at kids like they're going to think logically and that they're going to do a 2-minute Google search on issues and actually understand what they mean. There is a lack of understanding of creators who actually want harm. And this is so important because when you entirely neglect all of the information that we give you at first, second, and third affirmative about why this is so harmful, and taking that harm away then gives the incentive to go into more research and development and more credible sources, then eventually when we listen to the outcomes of negating and we hear that people feel better heard, better understood, they are more informed of what they are, all of these outcomes are completely symmetric, except on their side of the house, these harms very much do still exist, and they very much are still just completely neglecting our entire case just due to things like how stuff that is harmful will be removed on TikTok. But we've given you countless examples of why that is not true. We've given you countless reasons why TikTok would not take it down in the first place. We have given you countless characterizations on why certain stakeholders are not going to do things. I think this weighs very heavily on this debate because when they're so contingent on the fact that there's a lot of accurate content, there's a lot of good content that becomes popular. When they lose that point of clash, they essentially lose all of the outcomes that they claim to actually have on their side. This is why we win the debate, proud to affirm.
Thank you to the affirmative reply speaker, and thank you to all speakers for a great debate. I'd now like to invite both teams to cross the floor and shake hands.
Good job.
And I'd also like everyone else just